Right now, Hurricane Helene barreling towards the Florida coast. Evacuation orders underway in some areas, and many are worrying how costly Helene could be. Doug Flynn joins us now from Flynn Zito Capital Management. Great to see you again. So some of the most expensive storms go well into $100 billion mark for rebuilding. Doug, what's the fiscal impact of extreme weather that we've seen?
Yeah, quite a bit, actually. It has a big impact on municipalities if it's uninsured and if the federal government doesn't help, because they're going to have to come up with that money themselves. And a lot of times they don't have the quote unquote rainy day fund, which is exactly why we call it that. And if they don't have that, they have to go out into the marketplace and issue bonds to get the money to cover these expenses. And then what that means is that the local municipalities then have to charge more for their services. Maybe their property taxes have to go up and people have to pay more, and that's where that shows up. So everybody pays in part of that if they don't get that money funded from other places.
I'm curious about that. To your point, extreme weather is pushing local budgets. I've been a local reporter in many, many areas. I know that firsthand. Communities are going into debt because of it. Do you think this is just yet another strain on Florida?
Well, Florida certainly has, an impact of it. There are other states, obviously. I mean, you have, floods, you have, wildfires, you have hurricanes, obviously, in different parts of the country. No place is immune. As my clients move about, they trade one natural disaster perhaps for another one in another part of the country. You can't escape everything. So those things do come up, and it's just a matter of how well run the local municipality is in terms of preparation. And it doesn't show up until after the disaster, just how perhaps unprepared they were. And if you don't get that federal money, and sometimes you don't, that's where it shows up. And so it gets people paying a lot more money than they intended to live where they want to live. And that's where I think it's a problem.
Doug, we have to talk about hiking up the cost of home insurance. We know the national average cost of home insurance is just above $2,000. Premiums reportedly rose 40% faster than inflation. You mentioned your clients, it's one natural disaster or another, depending on where you're living in the country. How do homeowners prepare?
Yeah, that's a problem. A lot of times people don't think about, hey, I'm going to move to a state like Florida, which doesn't have any state income tax. I'm going to save all this money. And they don't check into how much is it going to cost to insure that home. Florida has some of the highest homeowners insurance rates in the country. And perhaps it could be 2 to 5 times more than what you're paying, depending on where you live, just for an average size home. So people are not renewing their homeowners insurance and not pricing it, and some insurance companies are just exiting the market altogether because they can't make money in there. The costs are just too high. So there are things that you can do, but you do have to know going in that this is one of the issues in these areas where you have natural disasters, that it's going to show up in your homeowners premiums, no doubt.
You and I talked about local governments going into debt sometimes because of these weather catastrophes. Do you think the government needs to budget for the extreme weather we've been seeing?
Well, I'd like the federal government to budget for a lot of things it doesn't seem to budget for, and then they just go out into the world and float more treasury bonds and borrow more, is why our national debt is where it is. So it seems like they do end up backstopping a lot of places, even areas that are known. If the house keeps flooding in that area and you rebuild and it floods again, at some point it's like, what are we doing? But people, that's where they want to live, and they keep rebuilding, and we keep insuring it, or we keep backstopping it, so I don't know where the end is. Of course, we'd like to budget, but we're so in debt as a country, I don't know how they budget for anything, really.
Yeah, always easier said than done, as we like to say. Doug Flynn, thank you so much.